Hello class, this is Dr. D and I am doing a lecture for you on how to read difficult texts. I hope this is helpful for you. I know as I started teaching, when I was a student, I really liked to read. So I read a lot of the material because it was just fun for me. One of the advantages I have is I took a speed reading course when I was in my undergrad course, so I could read very fast and quickly figure things out. And that is probably the number one reason why you don't read. I'm well aware of your time crunched lives because I have that as well. And so I know it takes a lot of time. And I think with teachers giving you summaries of the material anyway, that makes you lazy because you think, oh, the teacher will just do it for me. They should tell me what this means. But part of your educational process is learning how to figure out what things mean. Another difficulty I think students have and why they don't read more is they don't understand they need to adjust their strategy for different purposes of reading. And we'll talk about that more, but you don't always read the same way for every single piece of material that you're going through. You need to think about why you're reading it and what you're going to do with the information once you get it, and that determines how you read. Also, they just are confused. They can't even figure out sometimes the structure of what they read. So I'll give you some strategies for that later too. Also, they can't imagine that they're having a conversation with the author. Authors are people like me. I've written articles, I've written a book chapter. This is something that as professors we do. Well, you could imagine yourself talking to me. But I'm here to tell you that all of these textbooks that we give you in articles, those are just the author's point of view. And sometimes those are backed with evidence, and sometimes it is simply an opinion. So when you're reading things, I want you to think about having a conversation with the author and how that would be for you. Also, sometimes I think it's hard if you can't carry the thread of what you already know into your new information. So, for example, you just don't even understand this concept of cognitive behavioral therapy. There's a lot of pieces and you don't understand any of the pieces of it. Well, it's going to be really difficult to assimilate that then because it's so unfamiliar and you can't combine it into your cognitive schemas. It's just too out there and confusing for you. Also, sometimes students have trouble with the vocabulary or the way that something is written, the syntax of it, and they just lack cultural literacy. And you might say, well, I understand about culture. I'm a social worker. But what I mean here is that lack of cultural literacy has to do with you have to understand a lot of outside information to understand a text fully. Think of a cartoon. If you're going to look at a cartoon where either the reason it's funny is because of your culture. I don't know if you've ever known a person from a different culture and you've hung out with them and they think something's hilarious that happens and you just don't even find it amusing at all. Well, that's probably because in their cultural view that was funny based on what they know, but based on what you know that was not funny. So just kind of think about that if you don't understand where this author is coming from and the context in which this piece of material exists, it's going to be very hard for you to understand the piece. So that's something you need to consider. Because what I can tell you is the professor wants you to read and understand what you're reading at a very deep level. They don't want you to just surface read and kind of understand it and know it for the test. When you get out there in the profession of social work, we want you to remember this stuff and be able to apply it. We want you to understand it. And we want you to struggle with it a little bit. We don't expect you to know everything. That's why you're here getting an education. That's what education's about. But how the heck do you know what the professor wants from you? They give you this assignment. They act like it's so simple, but to you it looks like a bunch of Greek letters up on the board. You're like, I don't understand at all what this professor wants. So what do? How do you figure this out? Let me tell you that as professors, we give you lots of clues. So the first step is to read the clues to determine the purpose of the assignment. And where can you find these clues? They're in the syllabus. Some of us do grading rubrics. Some of us do not. So that depends on the professor. There are class lectures where we might talk about the assignment, where you can ask questions about the assignment, as well as email. You can ask your friends. Once you've done all of those things, I suggest then you ask the professor. But don't come to a professor and you haven't looked for the clues and you haven't tried to figure this out for yourself, because then you come to us and you're totally clueless, and it's very hard for us to describe the assignment, especially some of the complex assignments you're going to get in the MSW program. So, look for the clues and think about, for you, what is the type of writing assignment that you might possibly get. In my mind, there's 4 types. So, as you're trying to figure out what you're going to do for your strategies, you need to figure out what's the purpose of this writing assignment. So, you might have a reflective essay. You might have case notes or reports, problem analysis, or maybe the dreaded research paper. So a reflective essay is something we might ask you to do to give us an opinion on maybe do you think this theory would fit with your way that you want to do social work practice. So you might read a piece and you might think about it and write something. So you're reflecting upon a piece of information and you're writing what you think about it. Case notes and reports are very straightforward. You're just reporting what you see. An example of this might be a psychosocial. In this class, you reviewed a court report. That's a typical kind of case report you might do. A reflective essay wise, you've done a letter where you talked about your own writing and what your past experiences with writing have been, and you also did a piece on pre-writing and how you felt about that and what you thought about this whole pre-writing idea. So those are reflective essays. You haven't done a problem analysis. However, in the course of doing this particular research paper, I noticed by looking at your topics that some of you are interested in doing a policy analysis. So that would be a problem analysis where you are thinking about a particular problem and analyzing it, applying some kind of theory to it, and telling us how you would use that information. And of course the research paper, which has to do with gathering evidence and giving it back in a new way or adding to the evidence you've gathered with your ideas. So the second thing, after you figured out what kind of purpose, what is the professor wanting from me from this assignment, then you try to figure out what approach you're going to take to the reading process. You don't read every piece the same. There's a lot of different strategies that you can use. I've listed some here. Taking marginal notes is an approach. Okay, but first, before I start these, let me tell you, I do not think you should only highlight a text. I think that's not a good way. It's one way to remember important stuff, but really that's not a deep way of reading anything. That's not a deep reading process. That's a very surface type of thing. Now, I highlight everything. Colors, I'm very visual, and colors help me remember. But I don't only highlight. Like, I might highlight a statement, and then I might write out in the margin what I think about it. I might say, well, I agree with this, or this sounds like just what happened to me in practice with this client, or, oh yes, this research approach makes sense to me because of this. So I respond to what they're saying, or I might summarize something if it's really confusing to me. I might summarize what the author has said. Graphical organization is also a good strategy to take if you're really confused about what this piece means. I mean, and I do that sometimes with your papers. I do that sometimes with papers that I read that are very difficult to understand. I write out the outline, or I may do a concept map. If you don't know what a concept map is, it might be very helpful if you're a visual type of person, because you take a concept and you organize a lot of ideas around that. So as you're reading, you can do a concept map. Oh, the author says this concept relates to this concept, and this is how they're related, and then you might add another piece in there, but you graphically write out, either in an outline form, some kind of organized manner, what you're reading. Also, you might translate the passage in your own words, because your words are going to mean the most to you. you're going to understand. That way you really have to understand it. Think of translating to somebody who knows nothing about this concept. That's what you would want to do for this passage. And think about not only what it says in this piece, not just the actual information or itself, but what is the purpose of this writing piece in the first place? As I said before, most authors are trying to persuade you to believe something in a different way. Is this what this piece is doing? Or is it simply presenting evidence, like in a case note? Just here's what happened. Not making any kind of idea other than that. Just telling you what it is. Is it informational? So think about that. What is it saying? And you might even make 2 columns on a paper when you're reading something. What is it saying and why? What is it doing when it says that? So, and I think it's important that you consider the source. You're going to read a social work research journal a lot differently than you're going to read a social work policy textbook. At least I do. Because a textbook is usually well organized and clear. There's clear chapter headings. It's, there might be questions that you can think about. So those are all useful tools. And if you have just a research journal article, it probably doesn't have any of those indicators. It will be in the APA format, so it will have some subheadings for organization. But other than that, it could be 22 pages of craziness that do not make sense. So you might have to do more graphical organization. I typically do. When I'm reading a research journal article, I typically have to do more organizing to think about how the ideas tie together. And I don't always read the article in order, which is another thing you can do, is you can read the parts you're most interested in and then go back later. I typically read the abstract. If the article does not sound like what I want to read, I don't even read further than that. So I read the abstract, then I skip to the discussion. If it still seems good after reading the discussion, then I go back and read the lit review and think about any useful articles and resources that might be in there for me. Then I read the methodology and see if that's sound. So I kind of go about it in a backwards way, and I think a lot of people do read that way, so just keep that in mind. I'm going to read the NASW News differently than the National Association of Community Health Centers website. Now, all these 4 resources might have great information on a topic, say the impact of healthcare reform on the elderly, for example, as a topic. You could probably find articles in all of these, but each one is going to have a different take on it. The NASW News magazine is pretty straightforward, and as a news magazine, I might use some different strategies than I would for a website, and I hope you do consider the source too. And then mix and match your approaches that you choose with the type of report that you're reading, with the type of work you're going to do, and with the type of material that, the type of material you're looking at. So there's kind of 3 factors that you need to think about. There's no right or wrong answer. For me, I would use marginal notes in a journal article, in a textbook. But you can't really do that on a website, can you? Because it's on the screen. So on a website, I would probably be thinking about responding more to what is said, summarizing what it's saying, thinking about what it's saying versus what it's doing, what it's trying to show me or tell me. So just think about that. Those 3 factors are very important to consider. I have provided you a note-taking guide. I don't know if any of you have partaken of that. It's under the syllabus tab, and I suggest you to use it. I have some general questions that are pretty good for any resource when you're kind of questioning the validity of it and trying to summarize what you're reading. But know that in this course, I'm not summarizing all the readings and material and websites for you. However, those will be on the final exam. So I'm suggesting that as you read, you try to think of some test questions that I might give you, because some of this material definitely will be on a test later. And just remember, the professor wants you to read and understand at a deep, deep level. So don't feel bad if you're struggling with it. I mean, professors, we struggle too. And remember, we only give you the articles we really like and understand. We're not going to give you an article that's hard for us, because we want to be able to explain it to you. So, I mean, and we might have already struggled with it. It might have been very hard for us, but we struggled with it and figured it out. So don't think that you should just out of the gate know how to do this stuff. It's a struggle, but it's worth the struggle, because in the end, you're going to have the information you need to be a great practitioner that I know you all can be. So I hope this was helpful. Don't forget to look at the research analysis grid. Don't forget to there's 2 different videos, how to read a social science scholarly article. So please do go to those and look at them. They're awesome. And, we will talk again soon.